episode of Let's Talk About It. Today we're going to be talking about dating for women. I've got Jess Forsdike here with me. Hey Jess, how you doing?
I'm great, how are you?
Good. So you and your husband Gareth run our Belmont Campus?
Yeah.
That's so cool. How did you and Gareth meet?
Yeah, we met through friends actually. So we were heading off to the Perth Royal Show actually, and so a friend of ours was sort of like, we're going to go past this uni to go pick up a mate. And it was Gareth, and I remember quite funnily enough, my first impressions of him were sort of like, what a weird name. And he's got really big ears, you know, like.
And so it wasn't love at first sight?
Not at all. I was kind of like, oh, this guy's a bit weird. And we kind of just wanted to get to the Royal Show. You know, we were a bit bummed that we were kind of not on our way there already, and that we were running a bit behind our sort of schedule that we had kind of expected for the day. Yeah.
Oh, that obviously didn't put you off too much?
No.
So I guess later down the track, did Gareth ask you out or did you ask him out?
Yeah, well, what actually happened is we'd kind of met and got to know each other, and he'd gone over on a holiday back to South Africa. And so we there was a mutual sort of thing there, and so we decided that we're going to give it some time, and he was going to go back and would see how things were when he got back. And he got back and he actually made a meeting with my parents to ask permission to ask me out. Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so he asked permission from mum and dad, and after a little while they sort of said yes, and it kind of that was sort of it. He didn't actually sort of ask me, and I didn't sort of ask him. It was just sort of this mutual kind of, this is a thing now. And so it's kind of funny.
Yeah, it just kind of happened.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what are your thoughts on, I think obviously the traditional view is that the men do the asking. What are your thoughts on women asking men out and pursuing that relationship?
To be honest, I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think God from the very beginning designed us to be in relationship, and we see that from the very beginning, that he wanted us to be in relationship with others, that it wasn't good that someone was alone, and so he wanted us to have companionship and mateship with people. And I think from great friendship can come great like a great dating relationship. And so there's nothing absolutely wrong with actually saying, hey, would you like to go out for coffee? And you know, maybe you've been hanging out in big group friendship circles and things like that, and you've got a great friendship with someone, and you sort of like, maybe this could be something more. There's absolutely no harm in saying, hey, let's just go out for coffee. And that's actually okay, you know, like it's okay to just kind of go for coffee, and it's not a big of a deal as I think sometimes we make it. You know, like it's just like, hey, we're just going for coffee, we're just catching up, you know, like it's not like, right, we're dating, we're now married, and you know, we've got 4 kids in a house. Like we're just going out for coffee as friends, and from a friendship you can then see whether this could potentially become a closer, and maybe, you know, in the future a marriage friendship.
So how did you know Gareth was the one? When did you figure that out?
The one is a very interesting thing, because is there a one? You know, like that's a great question. Is there a one? And I think sometimes we really frighten people with the idea of a one. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, you know, like there is this one, and it's like you have to find them, you know, like is there a one person, or has God actually given us a choice that we actually, of course, need to be really wise and seek counsel and really kind of find someone on the same journey and on the same trajectory as us, you know, like somebody that is seeking the same path sort of as us, that's going to champion each of us in what maybe God's called us to do, or what we want to see outworked in our life. But is there a one? I'm not so sure. And so I think, we've really frightened people with that sort of like, how did I know he was the one? You know, love is absolutely a choice. And like in any relationship, you choose to love that person regardless of what happens, or the situations that you walk into, or regardless of certain flaws, and that the reality is that nobody is perfect. We all have things that we struggle with, we all have weaknesses, and so, you know, we kind of have this, I guess, in our world, this idea of this, you know, this fairy tale, perfect, happy ending where there is no issues, there's no problems, but it's really such it's just not true. It's not the reality, and you're not going to find this sort of one where you never have any issues, you never have any problems. It's just not the reality. And so I think it's a choice.
Yes.
And so you choose, and you choose wisely, if that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
I think I myself felt that pressure about, who's the one and things like that. And I remember a friend saying to me, and I remember it so clearly, going, when you marry that person, they become the one, that God graces that.
Yeah,
and
great.
So, that really took the pressure off for me. It's like, obviously, you said, like, you look for those things. Are they godly and on the same path as you?
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, when you make that covenant relationship, when you get married, they become the one, right?
Yeah, exactly. And God is our one as well. You know what I mean? Like, it's about him first, and he's bringing someone alongside for you to become one and do that journey with. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, you talked about some of those things that you do need to look for in a partner, not necessarily the one and the fairy tale and the great feelings and emotions, but what kind of things practically do you look for in a godly husband or boyfriend?
Yeah. I think character is a great one. Like, you want to see evidence, I guess, or characteristics that are godly ones. I think also you want to see someone that is pursuing God, someone that is in the house, that is actually perhaps not even looking for you, but they're looking for God, and they're looking for God's purpose and his intention for their life. And I think, a great way to find somebody is to actually, be on team and be serving and being a part of even finding what God's called you to do and running in that. Because in that, you're going to also find somebody like-minded. You know, you're going to find somebody with those characteristics, with the same intention that you have in your life. And then from there, you're going to find somebody with the right heart, you know, like with the right fruit coming from their life. Yeah.
So if I'm wanting a relationship, how do we ready ourselves for that?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. And I think the best thing that you can do is to really deal with the issues of the heart, is to deal with your foundations, and it's to deal with your inner self and your inner life. I think, you know, we sort of think, I want that relationship. But the reality is when you get into a relationship, things don't get easier. They all of a sudden get harder. And, you know, it doesn't solve things, but it actually brings out the problems that you have within yourself. And, it's quite interesting because you kind of jump into a relationship thinking that it's going to just all be great now. But it doesn't. It reveals stuff. You know, like, there's nowhere to hide anymore. It's kind of like things that you could get away with when you were single and that you were kind of just doing life on your own and you could avoid. But all of a sudden someone else is there and they can see your flaws, and stuff comes out of you in those sort of seasons that actually hurt you and they hurt them. And so I think it's so important to, as much as you can, and we're always on the journey of wholeness, right? We never stop it. We're always constantly becoming more like Christ and becoming the people that he's called us to be. But as much as you can, to deal harshly and to deal with those sort of things is going to save you so much in the long run. And because you don't want to hurt that person, you know, like, you don't want to be bringing baggage and bringing things into that relationship in the future. And I got to say, I learned the hard way with that, you know, like, there was so much that I should have dealt with earlier that I didn't. And I brought that in, and it was a long and painful journey to sort of, you know, like, to deal with that and to kind of be on that process. And so I'd say deal with that, deal with the stuff of your identity and who you are, and deal with the issues in your heart, deal with the lies, the things that you believe that aren't true, and deal with that sort of stuff so you come into a relationship as whole and as healed as you possibly can, so that you actually come and you bless that person, you know, like, you're not actually hurting them from a place of insecurity or brokenness within your own life.
I think we have this idea that a relationship fixes it all and it goes away, but you're right, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. It just highlights it, and it will bring it up, you know, like, it will come out, and you then have the opportunity. It's like, am I going to deal with this, or am I going to continue to live believing and feeling and, you know, navigating these sort of rough waters.
So once we're in a relationship, let's talk about boundaries. How do we put those boundaries in place? What are some good boundaries? Even in, like, I think if you've been single for a while and you've got some good male friends, and how do you all of a sudden shift those boundaries?
Definitely. You know, boundaries is such a great thing, and I think what's important is that we look back as to where boundaries sort of came from and what they are, like what their purpose is. And I think if you go way back into the garden, way back at the very beginning, the first boundary that was ever actually put in place was of God, and it was, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Like, God actually instituted the first boundary, and there was just one, you know, and it was always to protect us.
Yes.
It was always for our protection. And you see what happens. It's sort of like, well, they did, and they crossed that boundary line, and it opened the world up, and it opened them up to a world of danger and a world of hurt. And so then we see again, it's like the 10 Commandments came, and there's more boundaries sort of in place, and they were always for our protection. And you can even see now within humanity today, boundaries from, you know, from forever, that have been put in place. Why? For our protection. And for example, like, let's look at, say, the road rules, for example. There are boundary lines on the road, and they are to protect us. They're to keep us safe along the journey. And if you were to jump into, you know, the far lane, there's oncoming traffic. And while it may be thrilling for a moment, you are at some point going to end up crashing, and it is going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt you, and it's going to hurt others. And so boundaries are so important to protect us and to protect others as well. And so in terms of relationships and things like that, we want to make sure that we have clear boundaries, because if there are no boundary lines, like even on the road, that is dangerous, and you're going to end up hurting yourself. And that's not good for you, and that's not good for anyone else either. And so clear boundaries are really important, and having those boundaries there. And so in terms of a relationship, you want to have those boundary lines. Well, you know, let's talk about in terms of a dating relationship. You know, there's a reason as to why they say don't drive tired, right?
Yes.
And so a very good boundary line is to say, you know what, 12 p.m, that's just a no-go zone. You know, like, I'm not going to spend time with you. And why do they say don't drive tired? It's because your ability to make sound and clear decisions when you're tired is impaired. And likewise when we're dating as well, right? After a certain hour, you're just not able to make the normal sound, wise decisions that you would in a normal hour of the day, because you start to get tired, and you start to kind of maybe not have had as much control as what you did when you were, you know, when it was 7 p.m. and you were kind of awake and you were all good. And so I think, you know, that's a great boundary to sort of have. And I think, you know, God wants to be on the journey with us in the area of our boundaries as well. And boundaries for different people are so different. We're all so different, and so boundaries look different for different people. And I think there are some definite foundational boundaries, like, you know, after a certain hour, it's just not wise to be hanging out together. You know, like,
nothing good happens after midnight.
No,
right?
it's just a dangerous time for you to be hanging out one-on-one. And I think you've really got to, I guess, pray and sort of seek, like, what are my weaknesses, you know, and that's different for everyone. And in a dating relationship, you've got to both kind of come with what are my weaknesses, and like, what do our boundaries need to be? And it's actually so important to put them in place, because they don't just automatically kind of come in. It's something that you actually have to intentionally put there. And if you don't put them there, it's like roadworks, right? And this kind of like the boundary lines aren't sort of there. It's dangerous, because you sort of don't know where you're going and what the boundary is. And it's just so important to make sure that you actually put them in place. And I think in terms of, say, a friendship relationship with a male, a great way to look at it is if you're going to get married to someone one day, and this guy, say, is still a friend, is what you're doing going to still be okay in terms of that you are married, maybe you've got 2 kids, and is your behaviour and what you're doing going to be sort of, you know, an okay thing when you're in an actual marriage relationship.
That's a great
And
test.
so if you can kind of look at that and go, well, hey, you know, like, are we texting like multiple times every day? And, you know, like, is our communication a friendship relationship, or is this more a close dating sort of relationship, you know? And I think that kind of draws the boundary lines for you. And I think, it's interesting, you know, like if you're sort of questioning like, oh, is this okay? I'm going to say it's probably not okay. You know, like if you're already questioning that, because you know what, there's three voices. You know, there's the Holy Spirit, there's your own voice, which is also, if you're a Christian, you're being transformed, right? You're on that journey of being transformed. So, or, you know, there's the voice of the devil. And so if you're feeling like, oh, I'm not too sure if this is a good idea, it's probably not a good idea. You know, like it's probably not a wise decision or a wise sort of choice for you to make. You know, I've got really close friends, but my goodness, we don't text like, you know, every hour or so. You know, like maybe once a week we'll catch up and, you know, we're talking and that sort of thing. And so same with our female relationships, our male relationships as well. And you've got to kind of, I think the great test is to go, hey, if I'm married to somebody else, is this appropriate? Is it appropriate that we're sort of hanging on one-on-one every night past 10 p.m? Like, is that okay? Like, would this be okay if I was at home? You know, my husband was at home with our 3 kids and you
I'm
know,
out with him.
And I'm out hanging out with this guy every night. Like, is that appropriate? And you kind of, you know, you kind of get your answer from that. And so I think keeping healthy boundaries within your, you know, male-female friendships is important to do early on, because one day you're going to marry someone, whether that's them or it's somebody else. You want to keep that friendship. And so if you have those boundaries in place, you're going to save yourself a lot of hurt and kind of, I guess, blurred lines down the track if you can kind of be really clear with those lines early on.
I think it can be hard as a female when you're single and maybe you're waiting on God to bring you a guy, and a godly guy, and you've got that desire to be in a relationship, and then you've got this friend here who's giving you that emotional kind of prop up that you want, and giving you that attention and that affection. But without any commitment. And so it's very easy to fall into that trap. For sure. But I think that test is fantastic, because you don't want to get into a dating relationship or get married and have to start cutting off friendships. Sorry, we can't be friends anymore because of the history we've got. And so it'll bless your future if you might feel good right now.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of boundaries, right? Like it can be thrilling to go in that other lane, but it's only a matter of time before it hurts you. And so good boundaries are there to protect us, they're there to bless us, and they're not only there to protect you, but they're there to protect the other person as well. And I think in terms of dating, like the thing that you want to kind of aim for is to always, like if this doesn't work out, then we've put these boundaries in place and it's all good. Like no one should feel hurt or, you know, like it shouldn't be an issue, because if you've got the right boundaries, there's been no accidents along the way. You've kept each other safe. You've left each other in a better place than, you know, like than where you sort of started. You've brought blessing to that relationship, and you've not kind of damaged areas in their life, if that sort of makes sense.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jess. That was incredible. So much wisdom in what you had to say. Appreciate having you on this episode.
Great.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About It. Make sure that you subscribe to our channel and like our Facebook and Instagram page so that you don't miss an episode.